Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here, and in this video I want to talk a little bit more about Avatar The Last Airbender Imbalance Part 1, the first part of the newest Avatar comic, Imbalance, with our new creative team. So I've already done my initial impressions video and I did the podcast with Greg, and I think the podcast definitely really helped to, discussing with someone else, get me to a point where like, yeah, okay, I know my final thoughts on this book, and I feel the podcast really helped me to realize that, look, I often feel like maybe I'm being overly critical at times in the comics, but discussing with Greg and seeing like how kind of, I wouldn't say unenthusiastic, but just, like not like hyped in a way about this book he kind of was really interesting to see, and that it was the same reaction that I had, and that like, it's a good book. There's not really a lot to complain about, but there's also not a lot to get excited about in the book either. It has a generally interesting topic of Bender versus non-Bender, but it doesn't do a lot with it, at least just yet. And obviously that's where part 2 and 3 will come into play to expand upon it. But it's just a solid part 1, and hopefully part 2 and 3 will get the series to a point where it will have done something interesting. But I'm still a little skeptical overall about Imbalance, and a lot of that comes down to the fact that I feel the characters are still so young that like we're trying to make connections at this point to Korra when we're so far away from that. Like, Aang lives for another 50 years after this point. And then obviously 17 more years for Korra to get to the point where Korra is. We're still like, what, 67 years away from getting to Korra time. That is so much time to bridge and to be sort of trying to make connections this early. They're cool, and in a way are like the highlight of the book, that they're teasing with the Katara and Aang scene, Air Temple Island. But where's that teasing eventually going to lead to? What... In Imbalance Part 3, we end Imbalance. Where are we at on that? I don't see like a temple being there. I can maybe see Aang making the decision that like he wants to live there, and like deciding that like, okay, I'm going to build something here, and making a decision to just be like, I have to stay around this city and really guide it to where it needs to be. But like, I think that's still a long way away from, it's an air temple, all the air acolytes are here, I'm living here with Katara, that sort of thing. And then it's similar with other stuff, like they've mentioned a police force for Cranefish Town. They're obviously trying to tease and get us to Metalbender Police Force, but there's so many things to get into place before that happens, and one of the biggest ones is just Chief of Police Toph. Toph in this book doesn't feel anywhere near that, because she's still sort of in the, break the rules type thing. So how does she suddenly become the one who enforces the rules? So how far are they going to go with that? By the end of Imbalance Part 3, is Toph in some sort of police academy training to be an officer? Because they can't, like, the way Toph is right now, they can't just be like, okay, you're powerful, Toph, metal bending. Your father basically, like, created this city. You're the chief of police now. They can't just do that without actually giving her proper like training, or at least doing some sort of a thing where like her metal bending academy is like converted into like metal bending and police academy. So that's the slight issue I'm having with this, in terms of, I don't feel massively strongly about like them going to be able to do anything that impressive with the Bender non-Bender conflict here. So the main takeaways I'm thinking the book is going to have is going to be the connections it makes from now to Korra. But we're so close to, like, now and, present day, like, basically the end of the show still, that we're nowhere near really Republic City just yet. They're actually calling it Republic City. Now, Part 2 and 3 could be amazing and, like, really move us forward, but I still think they are fundamentally held back by the fact that the characters are still so young. To me, this topic and this story, if you want to do what I think the writers want to do with this, I think you need to have all of the characters be like, like Aang and Toph are the youngest members of the group. I think they need to be at least 18, if not maybe like in their early 20s, to really tell this story as effectively as I think you need to tell this story. It just feels a little weird that we're going in with like Aang and Toph at like 16, based on the time skip that they mentioned in this book. About a year has passed since the rift, which would be, I think, in line with Aang and Toph being just over 16 years old. So it's just a bit odd that like we're so locked to like this side of the timeline, and Korra's like all the way over here. Yet you're trying to make the connections to bridge that gap, but we're so stuck on one side of the bridge, and like it doesn't really feel like the characters are crossing the bridge. It's just like they're trying to just make really early connections that are at times feeling a little forced. Like they feel natural enough, but it also feels like these would be much more natural if the characters were older. And the Air Temple Island, the Metal Bender Police Force, I think would be the main ones that when it comes to that. As far as the main plot goes, with like the villain and the main conflict that they bring up at the meeting, I think it's being written okay. I actually like the villain. I like Li Ling and her two daughters as like the main kind of force that is trying to, it seems like, take down all of the factories which made these decisions that led to Benders losing their jobs, and then Benders supporting Benders by also leaving their jobs, and creating this rift in the town. And it seems like she's trying to sort of fix that or support Benders by taking out the factories that did this. So that's going to be very interesting to see where it goes, because I want to know what their motivations are. Because, you know, they talk a bit about, what's the exact wording on it? The idea of like, you know, we need to protect our family, I think is what they meant. Yeah, what I asked you to do was for our family and the future of our home. We must be together on this. We must be united. Do you understand? So it's very much like she is telling her two daughters that, you know, you are destroying factories for the sake of our family. And like, is it just that she wants to make it so that she doesn't lose like her business or whatever's going on here to non-benders? Or did something happen? Like, where's the father in all of this? Was he a bender? Was he a non-bender? If he was a bender, I get the impression that it might be something along the lines of maybe something happened to him because of actions of non-benders, and like, did he lose his job or get injured in something that happened? That's what I want to know, and is that what kind of spurring her on? Because the last thing we need is to suddenly turn her into a Gilak-like character where she ends up being crazy. I think you have to have her have very human, very understandable motivations behind what she's doing. Even though she is literally telling her daughters to kill people. Which I actually found kind of refreshing with how kind of dark that was. In that, like, it's just these two teenage girls, like, literally forcing criminals to commit this other crime, and then being willing to kill people by like making them fall off cliffs, just in case they leak word of what happened. I like that kind of darkness, that they are willing to kill for this. It makes it seem serious. It makes the conflict have this sort of tension going on in the background. But again, like, I want to know what's going on. I don't feel there's a ton to speculate on outside of just, you know, the sort of the fact that one member of the family is kind of missing in all of this. But other than that, I as I said, Li Ling and the whole idea of like her very clearly going after the factories. Like the last page, you know, her with all the smokestacks in the background. It's very clear, you know, her plans are now in motion, and even the Avatar will be able to stop them. You know, just what is her plan? Is it going after the factories? Is that all it is? Because what she has is basically, her people are going to be trained in some basic kind of police enforcement. She has a security team of all benders, and she managed to convince everyone in the room to commit to this idea of the entire security force of the town being all benders. So the idea, I suppose, of this is that potentially this is going to allow benders to cause more chaos in the city, or it gets her people close to, I suppose, acting as like guards for factories, and that allows an easy way in to destroy the different factories or what. There's probably a little bit more plot going on there than just the kind of basic kind of stuff I'm trying to connect the dots with, but I think it's interesting. I hope they follow up on this, because I think a lot of people have been praising Li Ling as a villain, and I think she is good because obviously you like the intelligence, the way she was able to manipulate everyone basically at the business meeting, that she went off this idea that like basically everyone is giving Aang at least some respect in the room. Everyone seems to agree with the basic idea of we need a police force. Aang doesn't immediately have an idea for how to make that happen. She presents the first idea. She gives a speech. She basically very much gives Aang the sort of praise for the idea to sort of keep him on board and keep him away from being suspicious of her. So she played that really well to get into position. So the manipulative side, I think, is really good, and hopefully means she won't just have the typical, like we've had maybe a few too many times, like, I'm a crazy villain, I'm just out to kill people type plot. I think with her, once they give a good enough motivation, you could maybe do that if you want, but I'd like to think that they kind of, treat it with a little bit more respect. Obviously, as I said, the darkness and the fact that she's already tried to kill people is one thing, but notably, Aang did save the guy, so technically no one has died, no one has been hurt just yet, but she's also destroyed a full factory, basically. The Earth and Fire Refinery lost their main machine, so damage has been done. Other than that, as far as the character writing goes, like, as I said, I think it's all really nicely done. Katara and Aang's interaction, great. Aang and Sokka, that kind of brothers-to-be, basically, relationship is really nice in the book as well. I think with Sokka, it still has potentially what's been like an overall problem with most of the comics of just, he's not really been utilized in any role outside of just the comedy guy. He tells the jokes, the shopping, the typical gimmicks with Sokka. They're not really doing a lot more than that. They're trying to use him as the non-bender perspective from the group. Right now, they haven't really had him make any overly strong statements. He's just been like, making a comment here or there. He does say to Aang later on in the book, like, I wonder if you'd be their hero if they were non-benders. But they don't really say all that much with that scene. Like they could have maybe done something with Aang talking to Sokka on the beach in this scene, but immediately they make it a kind of joke afterwards. But hopefully when Suki arrives, Suki's also a non-bender. We don't really know what her perspective on all of this is. That could kind of change things, and her and Sokka talking together could make for like, okay, now there's more than one non-bender member in the group. Where do we go from here? I hope Suki does play a nice role, and hopefully that brings Sokka more out as a more interesting character. Because I'd like to see Sokka actually like make a plan in all of this, and him be sort of integral to like fixing some of these issues that they seem to be pointing out. Like a basic thing of like a lot of the people making the machines and stuff like that are non-benders. I'd like to see Sokka maybe find a solution that helps both sides in all of this. Something like that, because, I don't think with Sokka they necessarily want to just have him be the, I am committing myself full force to the non-bender side of things, that I feel benders are bad, because immediately then you have to have him oppose, like, all of his best friends, including his sister and stuff like that. And when we know that, like, okay, he feels a little bit kind of like the maybe physically weak member of the group because the rest of the team is all benders who can do this crazy stuff. But I think he also realizes that he's the plan guy, he's the idea guy, his intelligence is a really important part of the group, and he holds himself really well in a fight for the most part. It's just like maybe when they're fighting a volcano, there's not as much as he can do. I think he has that good perspective that I don't think we'll be seeing like the group split apart in this conflict. I think he might have to play the role of just helping to keep all the Bender characters like in perspective, in that the one thing that I've kind of liked with the portrayal of the Benders in all of this has been they've all been a little bit like, oh, people don't like bending, like it's this shocking thing, that they're also enthusiastic about their powers and they're kind of shocked that people aren't. I like that they're kind of having to almost learn this hard kind of truth all of a sudden. The other thing with it being still so close to ATLA is that it feels weird when characters are just being kind of blatantly disrespectful and not accepting like Aang's help when he was the one who like helped save the world. Like they're trying to like lump Aang in as like being one of these bad benders, even though he saved the world. That the reason that this town even exists is because he saved the world. That's a little bit difficult to kind of accept when you have scenes like the woman just flat out refusing to have Toph and Aang immediately fix her house, give her a better house with earthbending. But I think that's most of what I want to talk about with it. As I said, the main problem I have with the book is just that there's not a lot of takeaways. There's not a ton of discussion to really be had about the book. There's also not a lot to complain about necessarily with the book. As I said, my only real issue as such that is like directly really kind of clear cut is that I think Peter Wortman's Satoru, like take on Satoru, is a little off. I don't think it I don't think he captures the original design of the character that well. It just doesn't really look like him, and I think part of it is that they maybe made his hair just a little bit too kind of like big, maybe poofy a little bit. I think the glasses are a little big on his face, whereas I think the Gurahuru design for Satoru, the glasses were a kind of smaller feature on his face, and his hair wasn't as kind of maybe kind of big, kind of curly out there like it is here. It's just a small thing. Like I can't capture exactly why I feel that way, but it just, to me, I look at the character and I'm like, it feels like, okay, it's Satoru because I can tell like he has the kind of the apron, you know, the gloves, the glasses, the general hairstyle, but it doesn't necessarily feel like the character. It feels like someone like dressing up as Satoru rather than being Satoru. But that's the really only complaint I would have with the art. Otherwise, I think it's really, really good. So that's my thoughts on Imbalance for this video. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on the book. I think for the most part, that's going to be like one of the last times I've discussed a book until we start to get more information about part 2. But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.